For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Manouk with you on this Saturday morning. Ginsburg running a few minutes behind. He'll join us shortly to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. 2 hours of Jets content coming your way. The off season, the first Saturday show of the off season, Dave M. It feels like it's been about 8 months since we last did a show, but it was only 6 days ago on Sunday. 7 days ago on Saturday, a week ago, when the season wrapped up. But it seems like when you do a show, it seems like every 12 hours, all of a sudden you only do one a week. It really drops it down a bit. But nonetheless, good to see you. Nice to see you. I haven't really spoken to you for the last week or so.
Yep.
Your week. Did you have a good week? You were down at locker cleanout days, Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe start with that. Having been there on site, the general sort of tone of things. I read it all on the website on illegalcurve.com. I saw all the videos, but sort of in person, you sometimes get a bit of a different feel. What was your vibe down at locker cleanout day on Tuesday and Wednesday?
Unfinished business. That would sway. There are a number of overarching themes, I would say, Drew, from the 2 days at Canada Life Center, and unfinished business was definitely one of them, especially on Wednesday. A lot of expressions of we should still be playing tonight. We should be hosting the Edmonton Oilers in game one of the third round was being expressed throughout. A lot of those guys, there's a disbelief. You could hear like Gabriel Velarde talking about things that had gone wrong, and he was still kind of going over the loss. So that was definitely one of them. This team definitely, like Cole Perfetti talked about, still being hungry and how this just galvanizes them for even more next season. Now, of course, we don't know how the team's going to look, because that was the other sort of theme that I would say came out of the 2 days of speaking to the players. And of course, head coach Scott Arniel and Kevin Cheveldayoff was this idea of you need to re-sign Nikolaj Ehlers. And guys weren't being overt, but they were being fairly overt. Usually you hear people say, well, it's his decision, it's his right. He's a UFA, he's earned this opportunity. But a lot of guys were saying, we hope we get Nicky back. That was kind of that. Again, like I said,
they were doing everything short of offering to write a check or take a lesser salary in order to pay Ehlers.
Well, the salary cap went up, so they don't have to worry about taking a lesser salary.
That's
but
right.
you are right. Like that, that's kind of that second thing that I really noticed in the media availabilities was that this team was definitely wanting to see 27 re-sign or sign a new contract, I should say, with the Winnipeg Jets. So that those two things kind of prevailed. There's a lot that we took out of the individual things. Luke Shen playing through broken ribs, I thought was rather notable. Haydn Fleury expressing a desire to stay after having his first season here in Winnipeg and talking about what it was like to play in a hockey market. Cole Perfetti talking about the Manitoba miracle and, everything. And even, like I said, talking to Kevin Cheveldayoff and Scott Arniel chimed in on this, the prospect of a prospect like Elias Salamonson taking a step forward. And, it's funny because if you've been listening to this show, which I know most of you have, I've been describing him as a Dylan Samberg, right shot Dylan Samberg with a little more bite. And it was funny because I asked Kevin Cheveldayoff about him, and then Scott Arniel chimed in and said, look, we've got a perfect model for him in Dylan Samberg. So, we'll see. I would still predict that, that would, Kevin Cheveldayoff kind of finished his answer saying that could force us to make some tough decisions,
right?
Of course, because they have a number of guys under contract, plus the prospect of bringing Haydn Fleury back. I think that'd give them 9 defensemen. So,
which is, which you need. We've seen it, and of course, we'll delve into the defensemen and the unrestricted free agents and everything along those lines. What where I wanted to start, and I'm sort of glad that you mentioned that as one of the overarching themes, is this Nikolaj Ehlers situation, because we've all known all season long that Nikolaj Ehlers was a pending unrestricted free agent at season's end, and it has been relatively radio silence on that front. So now that we have a little bit of meat on that bone, I think it's worth mentioning. I've got the quote in front of me. It's on our website, illegalcurve.com. This is what Jets general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff had to say about Nikolaj Ehlers. I did get a chance. Nikolaj's agent was in town here. We met for probably about 2 hours on Monday. Obviously, Nikolaj's been a player that's grown up in our organization, drafted, developed him, someone we think the world of. We obviously went into this year eyes wide open that he was a potential unrestricted free agent. Players earn that opportunity. When we get a chance to talk to him, we'll put our best foot forward with him to try to make our case to be one of those guys that can be a unique Jet for life type player and see where it all goes. The relationship is great. He did contribute to the success of this organization on many fronts, and we hope that that's something that could continue. That's Jets general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about Nikolaj Ehlers. He goes on to say that if Ehlers goes in another direction, which he's entitled to do, then the Jets will have to pivot accordingly. No, not breaking news on that front. I was a little surprised about that because I thought the writing has been on the wall for the most part that Nikolaj Ehlers is likely to look elsewhere. I still think, if I was a betting man, that he is likely to not be a Winnipeg Jets player next year.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff here does use the term Jet for life. They're going to put their best foot forward. That's what Kevin Cheveldayoff himself is saying. We know what the dollars are going to be. I mean, within reason, we have a pretty good idea of what Nikolaj Ehlers' next contract is going to be. Do you think that this is more lip service, or do you think that the Jets are honestly going to try and step up and pay him what the open market might pay him, maybe a little bit less? We've seen guys take a bit of a discount to stay in Winnipeg. Where do you feel that this is heading as we're here on May the 24th and free agency starts in about 2 months plus a week or so?
Well, it's funny, Drew. I would go on the idea that I'm with you. I didn't think there's much of a likelihood that he was going to sign. I thought, okay, the Jets are going to keep him as an own rental. And although I know some people don't like that term, but regardless, that I thought that's what they would do, is that they would keep him in that regard. And they were prepared to let him walk, because Nikolaj, whenever he's been asked about his status, has essentially said, I'm just thinking about hockey. I'm not talking about that. So there's really been nothing in that regard. And now you're right. Kevin Cheveldayoff mentions that it's not like he said, oh, I had a quick conversation with Nikolaj Ehlers' agent.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a conversation with a guy, as we know, Kevin Cheveldayoff is always having conversations.
The phones are ringing.
The phones are ringing. You answer them. You put it
dial
down.
Out
you
on
answer
them.
it.
There's all sorts of things you do on phones.
It's amazing. The technology is like first rate. But so I was of the same opinion that I just assumed that Nikolaj Ehlers was going to be wearing a different jersey next year. And, that was that essentially. And that, if you won the Stanley Cup, then it was a worthwhile gamble. If you don't, then it wasn't. But that conversation, that comment by Kevin Cheveldayoff, I thought I agree with you. It's funny how when you're doing these media availabilities, certain things jump out at you, when you try and take note of them. I mean, it was a lot of, I think we did 13 players. 13 players spoke, as well as Chevy and Arneal. So it was a lot of things to kind of take note of. But yeah, like using terms like Jet for life. And they used it with Adam Lowry, and we'll talk about that, obviously, a little bit later. We can talk about Adam Lowry's status.
I mean, Adam Lowry as a Jets for life doesn't even bat eyes because he's the captain of the team. He's the heart and soul of the team. It makes perfect sense that he'll be a Jet for life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can talk about him after. But yeah, just using that idea of like Kevin Cheveldayoff saying we'll make him a Jet for life for Nikolaj Ehlers. Like we want, that's kind of the approach that he was hoping that they would take them in. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, Bruce Boudreau, not that I don't know that he has any insight on the Jets specifically, but he was asked, he's doing his little, we have it on the website, but he was doing essentially like a, whether he thinks that these UFAs will leave or stay. And he actually thinks Ehlers will stay. So maybe, and I think Dreger also was talking about it. And I know Murat was on with Huss talking about this concept. So I know this is the rage. This is going to be the conversation until July 1st. Which, Drew, you said is in 2 months. It's in a month and in a week. So it's not even in 2 months, isn't it? July 1st, right? So,
right.
So I was like, no, it's not even. We don't even have that much
6
time.
weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Time flies.
So,
I was getting confused on the calendar. It's hard to read a calendar. I'm not very.
no,
bright.
it's all good. It's all good. But no, I just think we can get Ezzy's opinion because he's just jumping in now. But like to me, the Nikolaj Ehlers conundrum, which is what it was, because I didn't think. Hey, we're just
Good morning,
just,
boys.
Just
Let
so you
Dave
know,
finish his thought, then we'll get into you.
yeah, Drew
Sit there quietly for a minute.
Drew could reset. Oh, whoa!
Yeah, there you go.
Why did he go out? Come on, bring him back
I'm
in.
joking. I'm joking.
So, anyways, no, I just think that it's one of those situations where if you would have asked me what the likelihood of Nikolaj Ehlers staying in Winnipeg was before Wednesday's conversation with Kevin Cheveldaev, and again, Drew, it could be not necessarily a ruse, but it could be trying to just say, listen, I had a conversation with him. They chose to go another way. That's fine. That's possible. I just think the length of time to have a 2-hour meeting, that seems like it's a little more detailed than, let's just have a quick cup of coffee. What do you think the likelihood?
Conversation.
Yeah. So to me, like it would move the needle a little bit for me. I still think it's more likely that he leaves, but I would maybe put it at like 40% for me that he sticks around past next season.
Okay, now we'll welcome to the program Mr. Ginsburg, who will be heavily fined by the illegal curve kangaroo court for showing up so late. But
it's a $5,000 fine, right, Drew?
It is, exactly. As soon as you piece that together, you can pay it off in
installments.
It'll
take me 4 years to pay that off.
What I was asking Dave about, Ezzy, is, we read the quote from Kevin Cheveldaev regarding Nikolaj Ehlers. And, I was saying, does this seem like more than just a lip service sort of quote, talking about they want him to be a Jet for life, that, Chevy sat down and he talked to Nikolaj Ehlers' agent for a couple hours this past Monday. I was asking Dave, do you think there's more meat to this on this bone, that there's a better chance now after these comments that maybe Nikolaj Ehlers will stick around and will be a member of the Winnipeg Jets organization moving forward, as opposed to hitting UFA status on July 1st and going elsewhere?
Boys, I was hoping I was going to walk into a Nick Ehlers discussion. I wasn't sure where you guys were going to be, but we're getting right into the big one, right? I think, to Dave's point, right, like he just mentioned, he thinks there's a 40% chance that Ehlers could sign in Winnipeg. It's an interesting number. It's kind of like the numbers they give in for weather, right, Dave? Like 40% chance of rain, right? I think, look, the fact that we learned that there was a 2-hour conversation is definitely promising. I mean, that can't be negative. I mean, if Chevy would have said we didn't have any conversations, then I think, we're basically, wishing Nikolaj Ehlers the best in his new city, right? But
right. Like
right now, it's
Mitch Marner, sort of. It's the writing's on the wall there.
Exactly, and I mean, Mitch Marner's definitely not coming back to Toronto. That's for sure. That's a whole different conversation. But it's tough to tell right now, right? Because right now it looks like there's a chance that he could sign, but really the Jets and Ehlers camp might be too far away that on a number, and we believe it's kind of going to be around that $8 million a year range, maybe around $8.5 million a year, right, guys? I mean, I don't know if he gets close to $9 million. We'll see. I mean, he is coming off of a really good playoffs. And one thing I'll mention too, guys.
First time in his career, a really good playoffs.
Yes, that's true. His struggles in the playoffs have definitely been well documented, but that was also an emotional end to the season, right, guys? Like, does that factor into it at all, right? What happened in Dallas, losing in 6 games, but also, Scheifele's dad dying, the fact that the Jets were 1 goal away from forcing a Game 7 and bringing it back to Winnipeg. I have absolutely no idea. I think ultimately, as Chevy said, they're going to make him a big pitch. And I don't think it's going to be insulting. I don't think the number is going to be way lower than, and again, the 2-hour conversation, I think is promising, but the Jets only have $25 million in cap space, guys. Like, there's only so much money to go around. Gabe Vilardi's going to get a big contract coming up. Dylan Sandberg's going to get a big contract coming up, and the Jets have other holes to fill, right? Like, we haven't, dove deep into, like the Mason Appletons, the Brandon Tanevs, like those types of players, right? Like, are those guys coming back? I think there's a chance those guys aren't coming back, and the Jets are going to seek to fill those roles with younger players, right? Like, whether that's a Nikita Chibrikov, whether that's a Brad Lambert, whatever, right, guys? So I wish I could say that, I'm super confident that Ehlers is going to sign. I hope that he signs. But right now, I think, to Dave's point, it's up in the air. But to know that they've had a long conversation in the last week is only a good thing, right?
To me, I think the money is there if you want the money to be there for Nikolaj Ehlers. I understand the argument about the salary cap and the Jets having $25 million, in salary cap space. Well, that number is going to keep going up over, year over year over year over year. So, really, you just need to look at it. Can you fit him in for the next year? And then after that, I think they're going to be in a fine position, even with extensions for Connor and for and for the Sandberg and some of the bigger ticket ones, Perfetti and Velarde, of course. I also look at the Jets without Nikolaj Ehlers. I mean, from my perspective, the Jets are if Ehlers is gone, you're now 2 top 6 forwards away from being what I would describe as a Final Four team in the NHL, in the a conference finalist regular. That's not something that's going to be easily filled on this roster. I know that the young talent is mostly and predominantly up front, but those guys might still be a year away or 2 years away from just breaking in at the NHL level. What do you do in the here and now if all of a sudden Nikolaj Ehlers isn't in your top 6? If your top 6 is Cole Perfetti and Vlad Nemesnikov, and then a giant hole there. And then we know Nemesnikov's not suited for a top 6 role. He's doing a yeoman's effort to fill that role for the Jets. To me, I just don't, I don't think that you go crazy with Ehlers, but I also don't like the look of the Jets top 6 minus Nikolaj Ehlers, Dave.
No, I mean, I think it's a good point. I mean, one thing I'll take note of is that the Moose did move Brad Lambert from center to wing. So, I mean, that's one thought. I mean, we saw it with Jack Roslovic when he was with the Moose and they moved him from center to wing as well. And the organization maybe thought of him more of as a winger than as a center. And perhaps that's as an audition for Nikolaj Ehlers. Now, I mean, we're talking a guy who's 8 years younger than Nikolaj Ehlers, so you're not going to have him step in and assume that role, especially without sort of the center that you're talking about, Drew, right? Like That's the big hole we talked about that hole before the March trade deadline. Was the biggest hole for the Jets was at 2C, because if you had, imagine if the Jets had been Scheifele, Schenn, Lowry, Nemesnikov, as opposed to trying to fill in that 4th line center role with someone who is not necessarily, not that they couldn't do it, but Nemesnikov would be very well suited for that role.
Sure.
And we know he's like a jack of all trades. He can go anywhere really, but I was going to say Swiss Army knife, but I really feel like Nino Niederreiter should really, as he be the only Swiss Army knife on this team. So,
well, maybe you can call Vlad Nemesnikov like the Michigan multitude or something. If you can use that if you want. Feel free to use that. I'll give you permission if you want.
It's fine, but
it's not going to work.
I was going to say, unfortunately, we've field tested that one. It wasn't very good, but
no, I thought of it just right off the top of my head right now. I thought I get credit for the quick-wittedness on that, don't I?
Well, I mean, if maybe it was, interesting, then maybe I'd give you a little more
no,
credit.
it's okay.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. But I think that, that to me is the biggest question mark for this organization, is just simply that it is a big hole and you don't have a natural fill for it. Like that's always kind of the way it is, right, boys? Like if you remember in 17-18, they had a really good defense and they had a very young offense. And so you were trying to hope that the young offense would be able to catch up. They didn't do it. And then of course the defense ends up breaking up, and then you have to kind of rebuild that core. And similarly, now you've got, what you would consider an established defense for the most part. And we talked about, maybe you can get one influx of youth, but really it's fairly established the way it is. And then you've got your forward group, but now are you going to go younger? Are you going to bring some youth into that? It's an interesting question. It's going to make the Jets. I mean, there's no question if the Jets don't have Nikolaj Ehlers, they're a weaker team. I mean, you can't argue that otherwise. So, I don't know. I mean, and again, like I said, is it just a leverage point? Might we see the Jets trade Nikolaj Ehlers so they can at least recoup a draft pick or something like they've done with, who did they do that with? What's his name? The guy that got
Kevin Hayes.
Kevin Hayes. Yeah. So I don't necessarily know that, but like I said, there's a million things that could happen. I would say that I got a little more confidence in the Jets' ability to sign him, especially also based on the way that guys talk about him, right? So if you hear from, Cole Perfetti, who sits beside him on the plane and plays cards with him and talks about how or Vlad Nemesnikov, like I said, as that was to me one of the things.
Dave, are you on the plane? Like, how do you know who's sitting where on the plane?
Because Perfetti told us that. That's the only reason. But it's and I was on the plane. I was hidden. It's like I was under.
In luggage.
No, I wasn't even in luggage. I was in, like the cart that they push out. I was like hidden. I was like compressed in the cart with like my microphone outside, so I could just pick up what was being said.
I had no idea you were a contortionist, Dave.
Yes. It took 40 hours to get me into that position, but no, I mean, I just think that, like I said, I was of the opinion he was going elsewhere as of July 1st, and then he, sign, wherever it's like a Carolina or something like that, or somewhere out east, but or even in California. But my thought is just that it moved a little bit more towards Winnipeg again. But again, like I said, I thought it was interesting comments from Kevin Cheveldayoff. I don't know that we can draw any sort of conclusion one way or the other.
That's the hard part, right? Like, this has been the elephant in the room, so to speak, the entire year, right? Like, he hasn't signed a contract yet. Like, if the Jets wanted to sign him and he wanted to stay in Winnipeg, like, why didn't they sign the contract? Well, because it's a huge contract, right, guys? Like, we're talking about, like we said earlier, right, guys, 8 to 8.5. I'm not sure. I know I've seen those projections. Maybe it's closer to $9 million a year. That would make him, if he's making $8 to $8.5 million, well, he's now in the Scheifele Hellebuck territory, right? So you're not talking about an insignificant amount of money, right? So at this point, it's really difficult to gauge the situation, because you have to ask the question, like, has he already made his mind up? Did the playoffs change anything? Did what happened in the first 2 rounds really affect his willingness to sign a big contract? I have absolutely no idea, right? Like, you remember when Scheifele and Hellebuck signed guys, there was a lot of uncertainty, and that kind of came out of left field, right? So there's part of me that thinks that Ehlers is going to test the UFA waters, and then there's part of me that thinks, no, the Jets, like Drew said, the salary cap's going up. The Jets are going to find a way to be able to keep him, right? Because if you look at the projections, and Connor Rabchuk had that on a legal curve, Dylan Sandberg and Gabe Vilardi, they're going to take up close to half of that $25 million, right? You're talking about $6 million for Vilardi. You're talking about, around $5 million. These are just projections, right? Gabe Vilardi is actually projected to be closer to $7 million a year. So you're talking about $12 million, right? So that's half of the $25 million. Also, we don't know what the Jets' internal cap is, right? Like, we can't just assume, guys, that the Jets are going to spend up to the ceiling of the cap. We expect them to be close to the ceiling, but they also had $6 million left before the trade deadline that they could have used, and they chose not to use, right? So it's just something to think about, that, yes, Ehlers, like, there's a chance that Ehlers signs here. And I realize that maybe people are looking for more, certainty here. But the reality is, like, you ask Murat, you ask Mike McIntyre, you ask any of the Kenny Weeb, anybody who's dialed in the most, I think right now there's kind of, like Dave said, it's kind of like 50-50 or 40-60 to whether he's going to stay. We do know that Ehlers loves Winnipeg, and he's obviously played his whole career here, but we just don't know how close they are on that magic number, because this is going to be Ehlers' big payday. Let's be honest, boys.
Yeah, there's no question this is his last biggest payday as an NHL player. AFP Analytics, who've been doing this work for DailyFaceoff, project Nikolaj Ehlers' next contract at 6 years and $8.1 million per season as a salary cap hit. This is, again, all on DailyFaceoff. Worth noting that AFP Analytics predicted both the Pionk and Iafallo contracts perfectly right, that the Jets handed out late in the season as well. So, again, we know what the number is going to be. It's going to be right around that $8 million mark for the Winnipeg Jets, somewhere in there. If Ehlers gets to July 1st, does it get a little bit higher? Well, probably.
I think it's going to be higher than that, guys.
Well, remember, because they can only do 7 years, right?
Everybody else can only do 7 years.
Yeah.
The Jets can do 8. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, again, I think, how much do you think his usage in Winnipeg might be making him look elsewhere for opportunity? Because I think I saw that 5-on-5 ice time in the playoffs, he was the 7th most used.
No,
forward.
they were wrong. Murat said it was 9, so he was 9th overall at 5-on-5. I know that I know the number, that it was 7, but it was actually 9.
So he even had less time.
And that was the same. And for the record, that was the same for the regular season as well.
Right. So he doesn't get a lot of 5-on-5 time, despite being certainly one of the most dynamic players for the Winnipeg Jets. He got power play time on the first unit this year that he hadn't had previously in his career in Winnipeg. So how much do you think that factors in to some of the thinking or some of his decision making. It's interesting, of course, that we never got a chance to speak with him. He immediately went off. What an upset, by the way. Great for him and the country of Denmark. I don't understand how a team with Nathan McKinnon and Sidney Crosby, never mind everybody else, lose to Denmark. But a hell of a party, and great to hear our buddy Dan and Kevin Sawyer on the call for that game. You know, it's funny. I was texting with Dan. In the entire Jets season, I'm digressing quickly here. On the entire Jets season, they do 60 games on TSN over the course of, the 6 months or whatever, however long it is. They do 30 games in 14 days at the World Hockey Championships. That is an insane number of games.
Well, Dan and Kevin don't do all those games.
Yes, they do. That's Dan and Kevin's games. And then Gord Miller and Mike Johnson do the other half of the games.
There's that many games?
They do 30 games.
They do 30 games. Because there's so many preliminary round games between Hungary and Turkey that you don't pay attention to, and nobody pays attention to.
Well, Dan does.
Well, Dan does. I mean, they have to. But yeah, that's what Dan said, that they do 30 games in something like 14 days at the World Hockey Championships. I mean, they're doing 4 a game. They do 4 a day sometimes in the preliminary rounds.
Okay, there you go. That's where I was trying to do the math. I was like, how are they doing more than two games a day? So obviously, if they're doing 4 games a day during the preliminary round, that explains it.
Yeah, there's a ton of teams that don't belong in the World Hockey Championships. Like TSN broadcast their games because it's content. Back to my original question, the usage.
I was very excited to watch Kazakhstan versus Guatemala, but
honestly,
I missed that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, congrats to Guatemala for qualifying their first year.
My question, Dave, is back to you about the usage. How much of a factor do you think that's going to be?
I mean, I definitely think it's one, but I mean, look, if you're Nikolaj Ehlers and you're going to get paid, then, then does it matter? I mean, you're part of the cog in the wheel. You're not the only cog. So, could you see the Jets move him up? Maybe, but I mean, like I said, like there's a lot of factors. I mean, look, there's guys who have gone and signed big tickets. And, the question becomes like, is Nikolaj Ehlers, I mean, remember, part of it is you want to win a championship. Do you want to get paid? Okay, so he's going to get the money. And, it's going to be within, I mean, he might make more in the AAV realm elsewhere, but maybe he makes more money overall by virtue of that 8th year the Jets could offer him. But from the perspective of, we also, we tend to think Nikolaj Ehlers can play, above where he's been at, right? As he tends to take short shifts, which I know a lot of people focus on his shift length. Because a lot of guys will take, 50 to a minute 10, whereas Ehlers, I think, goes like 40 to 50 sometimes. So
because he goes so fast, Dave, he needs to get off the ice the same way he skates on the ice.
Exactly. So that to me is like something to consider, Drew. That the ice time is a factor, but Ehlers naturally tends to take shorter shifts, I think, than most of the other guys. And I think his usage is definitely a subject of the conversation. But I think that really, if you're him and you're prepared to sign, then at that point, again, it's kind of like Mark Scheifele, right? Like we talked about it. And, we said that Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, if they want to win a Stanley Cup, they cannot play offense only. They have to switch to defense. Now, ironically, they had their best offensive seasons in the Jets' best defensive season. So that kind of tells you what it takes to.
And they had their best defensive seasons as well.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying like everybody was contributing, but you're also being able to do that defensively. So you had to be willing to amend the way your game is going to look in order to, again, have everybody pulling in the same direction. And that way, from that perspective, I'd say that if you look at like Ehlers' usage, I mean, I definitely think it's a conversation piece. But again, if I'm him and I'm going to get the 8 times 8, for example, or whatever the number is going to be, but whatever that number ends up being, if I'm him and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get my money. I'm going to still be, on the first power play unit. I'm going to be here and have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. If he believes that, then maybe it's worth staying. And if he doesn't, and if he thinks I want to be on the top line and, I want to get $11 million a year, whatever it's going to be, then fine. Then he's obviously not signing in Winnipeg. And it could just be, again, with agents and with players, well, not Ehlers because he really didn't say anything. It could just be a leverage move, right? Like it could be that, these teams like, oh, maybe Nikolaj Ehlers is going to. He keeps look at the conversation we've had now for the first 30 minutes of this show.
Well, it gives us the content at the very least, so we appreciate it nonetheless. When we come back on the show, Kelly Moore from 680 CJOB is going to join us for more Jets talk. It's a Saturday morning. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's presented by Play Now. It continues after the break with Kelly Moore.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and our good friend, the man with the piano, Kelly Moore, joins us on the program. Kelly, great to see you. How are things?
I needed 10 men with strong trucks to get that piano into the into the picture. Fellas, I don't know how the quality is. My headset that I normally use got scooped up, I think, at the Sea Bears game last night. So I apologize if my microphone's a little sketchy. Working on the backup crew.
It just makes you sound more unique is all I would say, Kelly. We'll power through because the content and the insight can overpower any mediocre microphone. So that's the important part.
Now
I know.
I'm going to disappoint everybody.
Kelly, obviously, good morning, first of all. We were talking about Nikolaj Ehlers, and we spent the first 30 minutes or so of the show talking about Nikolaj Ehlers, and I'm sure everybody around the city has been spending a lot of time talking about Nikolaj Ehlers this week. You know, we read Kevin Shoveldayoff's quote about having spent time with Ehlers' agent. You were there, of course, in the end of season media scrums and interviews. What was your sort of, perspective on Nikolaj Ehlers and his potential future, maybe potential not so future with the Winnipeg Jets after hearing from Kevin Shoveldayoff this week?
Well, guys, I had my own opinions well before we heard from Kevin Shoveldayoff, and even when Nikolaj Ehlers chose not to address the issue at the season opening golf day for the Jets at St. Charles. And when you look at how the team is constructed, how many players can you comfortably have on the roster on long-term deals that are going to expire in their late 30s? They've made that commitment now to Mark Scheifele. They've made that commitment to Connor Hellebuck. I'm positive they're going to make that commitment to Josh Morrissey and to Kyle Connor. And to a certain degree, they've made that commitment to Neil Pionk, although he would be in his mid-30s when his contract expires. So I just wonder if the Jets are taking a look at it and saying, okay, these are the long-term deals that we have available to us. Do we want to have more than half a dozen players on those kind of contracts? And I would suggest probably the decision was no. I think if they could get Nick to agree to a 5 to 6 year deal, then maybe that would alter things. And who knows, maybe that's what the course of conversations are that are taking place. For sure, the Winnipeg Jets would love to retain Nikolaj Ehlers. But Nikolaj Ehlers is a private contractor at the end of the day, and he has to look after himself. And it's been well documented that his 5v5 time is 9th. But take a look at the shifts. Nikolaj Ehlers plays shorter shifts than some of those players that are ranked ahead of him on time on ice. So look at the actual shifts that are being taken as opposed to the time on ice. I know there was one comment that was made during Game 6 of the Dallas series that Ehlers and Cole Perfetti were well below Mason Appleton's ice time. But there was a one-shift differential. And that's because Appleton was on that line with Lowry and Niederreiter checking Mikko Rantanen, Rupe Hintz, and Mikhail Granlund, which required longer shifts. So just put a little bit of context into everything that that gets talked about.
Kelly, before I ask my question, I figured out what your voice sounds like. It sounds like we're flying in a. It sounds like we're flying in a helicopter, and I'm sitting beside you.
In a helicopter.
Well, I'm looking far below down at the city, fellows, and I can tell you the traffic is very heavy on the Disraeli Freeway right now. We do have about a 5 to 6 late cycle weighted confusion corner, and on Kenniston, it is the usual 45-minute delay. That's on the illegal curve.
I've never seen you and Brian Barkley in the same room, Kelly. So I'm wondering if we're onto something here.
Yeah, that's my next. Between shaking hands at a department store and doing traffic, I think that's going to be probably my future gig.
Can you imagine, Kelly, if next time we had you on, we were all in a helicopter together and we all had the same setup?
No one's afraid of heights.
Yeah,
exactly. Just continuing on Nikolaj Ehlers, though. I mean, we already were talking about it right before you hopped on, but I mean, it's obviously what everybody wants to talk about because of the hole that he would leave if he left. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you believe it's possible for the Jets to fill that internally, or are you looking at free agency, possibly an offer sheet? That's something that, I know that we plan on talking about on the show eventually because of the success that St. Louis had with signing Phil Broberg and Dylan Holloway. Like, I guess, again, the question that I pose to you is it possible for the Jets to replace him without, having to dip into the free agency waters and bring in another winger, another top 6 winger?
If they weren't in play or win right now mode, I would say yes. But I think it's unreasonable to expect that Brad Lambert or Nikita Chiprikov, who would be the 2 leading contenders for that job, would be able to replace what Nikolaj Ehlers brings, not just offensively, but off the puck as well. That's the one thing, and I know you guys have probably discussed it, that maybe sometimes we overlook is Nikolaj is very reliable without the puck as well, and he's really improved that part of his game over the 9 years with the Winnipeg Jets. So I think that internally it would be a reach to expect either one of those 2 to be able to do that. Colby Barlow is not ready, and I don't think Braden Yager is either, although I think they look at Yager more down the middle than they do as a winger. So I would suggest that they would have to go the trade route, or they would have to take a look at at free agency, but as we all know all too well here in this Winnipeg market, the Jets are not high on the list of prospective free agents. And when you look at the free agent availabilities for July 1st, I don't know that the tree is full of plums, to tell you the truth. I think there might be a few crow-ravaged cherries on there.
Kelly, just one of the other things we were focused on this morning was just the overarching sort of themes that were coming out of those end of season media availabilities. And one of them was, to me, was like the unfinished business nature of it. And we've heard from this team for 13 prior seasons. Now this is the 14th season in these end of season. But to me, to a man, it seemed like every single player was like, I think of Cole Perfetti's words about how hungry they are and how they know I think it was you maybe who used the analogy of getting up a mountain. They know they still got a few more levels to get to. So did you pick up on that theme from this team? And does it hold you in an idea that, look, they achieved the President's Trophy this year. And I know Cheveldayoff said, we may not get it back there, but this team kind of has a focus. And with so many guys signed, obviously there's going to be question marks. It just seems like they're ready to kind of next year pick up where they left off this year.
Absolutely, and that was actually our good friend and colleague Murat Atesh who asked Cole Perfetti about that. The thing that I really like, guys, was the accountability. There was no shying away on an individual basis from what needs to be done. Everybody took a share in the credit. Everybody claimed a share of the responsibility for falling short. So that's what I always look for at the end of the year or even after a game. And I'll use a prime example, and not to pick on the Toronto Maple Leafs, but sometimes they make it so damn easy. Austin Matthews just makes a broad statement. There were way too many passengers. If that was Adam Lowry, it would have been, I was one of the passengers tonight that didn't hop off the bus, that just rode the bus, and I needed to get into the driver's seat. Adam Lowry would include himself in that conversation, and I think that's important for this hockey club. Even when Scott Arniel scorched them after that late January loss in Utah, there wasn't one player complaining or pouting about what the coach had said. Instead, they went out and won a big overtime in Colorado without their captain in the lineup the next time. So that's a lot of what we heard during the regular season, Dave, is what I thought we heard in the end of season. And the other thing that rang through very loud and clear is that this club has not lost one iota of its confidence, despite the roller coaster of a ride it was in the first round against St. Louis, and coming up short against the Dallas Stars. I mean, you go back to game one, and Pete DeBoer talked about it, so did Scott Arniel, that was perhaps the most critical game of the series. And what was it, with about 2 minutes, maybe 90 seconds left? The Jets came within about 2 or 3 inches of that puck going over the goal line on that goal mouth scramble of tying that game up and maybe getting the job done in overtime. If that's that's the margin of difference between the Winnipeg Jets perhaps getting ready to play Game 3 in Edmonton tomorrow night, as opposed to having to go through the exit interviews earlier this week. They aren't that far off. They really aren't. But, they have some other steps that they have to take on the journey. And as you guys well know, I'm sure you were talking about it, they have to find a way to win on the road in the playoffs. It is beyond my fathomable understanding, if that even makes sense, that this team could lose 10 games in a row on the road in the playoffs with the style that they play and with the personnel that they employ. That just boggles my mind.
Kelly Moore is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. You know Kelly, of course, from his tremendous Jets coverage on 680 CJOB. In addition to Nikolaj Ehlers being an unrestricted free agent, and among the forward group, Mason Appleton, Brandon Tanev are both UFA. If you had to predict any of the two back, one of the two back, both of them back, how do you think those two players shake out over this offseason?
Well, Drew, I don't want to take the easy way out, but the qualifier is, what will those players want in free agency? If Brandon Tanev is looking for another deal in the $3.5 million range. The Winnipeg Jets just can't fit that, I think, into what they want to do with the deals coming up for Gabe Vilardi and Dylan Sandberg.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they've got to look ahead, too, to Kyle Connor and Adam Lowry and Cole Perfetti the following year. Yes, the cap's going up, but it's not going up that substantially. So I think it's important what those players want. Mason Appleton made it very clear that he's looking for term at the age of 29 years old, now with a family. So I don't know how that plays into what the Winnipeg Jets want to do. I think that the potential to replace those players internally is probably a lot more doable. You have players like David Gustafson, like Jared Anderson Dolan, like Rasmus Kapari, who they might not be exactly the replica of what Mason Appleton and Brandon Tanev do. Tanev is exciting to watch, but he did not pick up a point in the playoffs. And Mason Appleton, he goes to all those dirty areas, all the grunt work and the spade work that he does. I hope people recognize. I know he can be a bit of a lightning rod, and certainly had the finger pointed at him for that great chance that he had with about 9.5 minutes to go, or whatever it was in Game 6. But there were other games where he had great chances and he couldn't finish. He hasn't had a playoff goal since 2021 during the pandemic season. So I think you have to look at, is there a potential for either of those two players to get better, or are they at the threshold and perhaps on the downward trajectory of their careers? And so I think that's going to be a situation where the Winnipeg Jets are going to have a long, hard discussion about that. Take a look at who they already have on their roster. And the long answer to that question, Drew, without knowing what the ask is going to be from the players, I think it would be more of a chance that those players would test the market in free agency as opposed to sign a deal before July 1st.
Kelly, we've talked about Nick Ehlers and Brandon Tanev and Mason Appleton. There's a few other players as well. Chevy's got a long list of guys that he's got to sign. I mean, what is your impression as we stand now? Who gets done first? Like, I look at Dylan Sandberg, and I've been saying this all season long on this show, and I'm sure that yourself and a lot of other folks on CJOB have been talking about this, whether it's on the pregame show or postgame show or just throughout the day, really, about how good Sandberg has been this year. And I just look at him and I'm like, you sign him to an 8-year deal, and whatever it is, $5 million a year, $6 million a year, whatever, because I think he's a guy that has proven to just be an absolute rock on the back end for the Jets.
This doesn't happen very often, but I agree 100% with you, Ezzy.
You might want to consult with a medical professional when that happens.
Yes, well, I am operating at a high elevation in the helicopter, so I can always fall back on that. But you're right, though, Ez. I mean, for sure, that has to be the priority. I think Dylan Sandberg is number one, and then Gabe Vilardi follows closely behind number two. And I think it was also very significant that the Jets did go out and do that deal with Neil Pionk, because the Hermantown two, for my money, were one of the best shutdown defense pairs in the entire National Hockey League, not just for the Winnipeg Jets. And you can see that being a reliable duo in going forward. Dylan Sandberg just kept getting better and better. And Dave, you were there for a lot of those availabilities too, where opposing coaches would single him out as one of the players that certainly figured to be a tough opponent individually when playing the Winnipeg Jets. So it's not only in this market. Dylan Sandberg is getting a lot of recognition and a lot of attention elsewhere, and it fits perfect to do an 8-year deal with him. He's going to be in his early to mid 30s by the time that contract expires, and the way that he plays, I think it's very sustainable. So whatever they agreed to in the number. And the one thing I think in this market as well, these players really enjoy playing here. So while they could probably get $1 million or $2 more on the open market, I think they take a look at the big picture. guys like Sandberg and Pionk are so humble. They understand that when we're talking about $45 to $50 million, that's not chump change. Their families just shake their heads and can't believe the amount of money that these guys are going to be able to make. And it's certainly going to be enough to sustain them and their families for the rest of their lives. So I think as long as the number is fair, and I can't see why the Winnipeg Jets wouldn't do that. They have a history, I believe, of rewarding the players who deserve it. And boy, does Dylan Sandberg ever fall into that category. And then Gabe Vilardi, for my money, would be next. You have Mark Scheifele already locked up. I think that, again, as long as the negotiations are fair, Kyle Connor would be, I think, more of a bet to commit to this franchise than to walk away. So if you're Gabe Vilardi, you have a chance to play with those guys into the prime and maybe a little bit past the prime of your career. Who wouldn't want that for a trio that was among the best, if not the best, in the National Hockey League this year?
Well, Kelly, you mentioned him a little bit in passing, and one of the guys. Now, we don't anticipate Kevin Cheveldayoff will do what he did to him last time when he wanted him to sign a long-term deal, which was call him a week before the trade deadline. So he thought he was getting traded. But the captain Adam Lowry talked about the idea of being. He said this was his 11th season here. So he kind of pictures himself as a Jet for life. We know he's eligible to sign a extension as of July 1st. He himself acknowledged, look, there's other guys who have to get done, like you mentioned, Vilardi and Sandberg and Ehlers potentially. But do you see any scenario where the captain doesn't sign his extension with the team this summer?
No, I do not. He embodies everything that the Winnipeg Jets franchise is about. In 49 years of working in this industry, I would put Adam Lowry among the top 5 captains that I've dealt with on a regular basis. Mike Keane is certainly at the top of that list as well. But Adam Lowry just says and does all the right things. The only thing that I wonder about is if you sign Adam to a 5-year deal, that gets him, into his age of 37, 38. The style that he plays, is that sustainable into those latter years? So I think that's going to be a conversation. Adam's such a reasonable guy. Maybe they can do a 3 or 4 year deal and feel comfortable about it, but also reward Adam Lowry for what he has done for this franchise. And I think that's important too. So there would have to be the context that if you're going to sign him to the kind of a deal that's going to be fair to both sides, understand, and this is no knock on Adam Lowry, it's just because of the style that he plays, understand that maybe the last year or so of that contract won't age as well as you'd like it to, but man, because of just what an incredible leader he is, I think that offsets maybe what might be lacking a little bit down the road. Will he still be able to play as that thumper? Will he still be able to be the first guy over the boards on the penalty kill? Do I make sense there?
You do make sense there, Kelly Moore of 680 CJOB. You always make sense as you join us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. The players all, said exactly what you would expect. I'm struck, though, by Scott Arniel. I mean, this is his first year behind the bench in Winnipeg as the head coach. What does he do for an encore in year 2? Jack Adams nominee this year. A lot of people were maybe skeptical about the hire when it happened. You don't hear that skepticism any longer. The players effusive in their praise for him. The Jets President's Trophy winning. That says a lot about the coaching job that Arniel does as well. What does he do in year 2 to try and push this team further along so that they do end up a Final Four team, or they do keep pushing their way up the mountain, as the analogy has been used so far this morning?
Well, the personnel will certainly dictate that. It should be, for the most part, a very similar hockey club to the one that certainly played so well this year. Let's face it. I mean, I don't want to ever say never, but the likelihood of starting off 15-1 for a second consecutive season is probably not doable in a central division that is only going to figure to improve. Yeah. So I think really, if you're Scott Arniel, you continue to be authentic. I think the team can be better with a coaching staff that'll now be going into its second year. One of the things Kevin Cheveldayoff said at the end of season exit meetings that I think makes a lot of sense. Scott now as a head coach and also his coaching staff, with Dean Chanouth and
Davis Payne.
I always want to call him Payne Davis.
That's his wrestling name, I think.
I think so, yeah. Marty Johnston, Wade Fleury. I mean, he's acutely aware of what the goaltenders do, so I'm going to leave him out of that. But I think the other three assistant coaches and everybody else that's involved in that staff have a better handle on what this roster will be capable of and what it won't be. But I think Scott just has to continue to be himself. There were a couple of trigger points. I've talked about that horrible loss in Utah that certainly Scott wasn't afraid to speak his mind. And I like that. It would have been easy just to say, well, it's January, we had a bad one. No, the standard is set high for this hockey club. So I think if anything, they're in a different way, but with the same goal in mind. I think you have to use the 82 games to prepare for 83 and beyond. They have an even better idea now of, and the one thing Scott said in his end of season exit meetings, and Kevin Cheveldayoff repeated, and that is play for the moment in the playoffs. And I think if you can get into the habit of playing for the moment even more consistently during the regular season, I think that's going to serve you well for trying to take that next step, whether it's into the third round or maybe into the Stanley Cup final. I think you're going to hear that term a lot. It might replace, we've got to get 5 to 10% better, which the hockey club does if they're going to keep up with the Joneses in the Central Division and the Western Conference. But I think they will probably not be as, I don't want to use obsessed, goal-oriented to finish first. They'd like to, but I think they'll be more focused on how do they structure their game over 82 to make sure that they are ready for when the puck drops for round one of game one. And certainly I'll look for eliminating now the extremes that we saw in that St. Louis series. Can they look more of themselves for more of each game in the playoffs than what we saw from them this year? I think that's going to be Scott's main goal, and I think that'll be probably the main goal of the coaches and the players as well.
And Kelly, like you said, they have to overcome their struggles on the road. It's I agree with you. We've talked about it a lot. It's almost beyond comprehension. It's almost like absurd, the difference in the way they play at home versus at the road, especially in the St. Louis series, right? I think you'd agree that they were much better on the road against Dallas than they were against St. Louis when there was some pretty big margins of defeat there. One guy I wanted to ask you about was somebody who I don't think we've even brought up or talked a lot about is Haydn Fleury. And I realize there's some people, that are in favor of Jets fans. There's a vocal amount of them that want to sign him. What is your kind of take on it? Because obviously Haydn, when you talk about Dylan Samberg and Gabe Vilardi, Nick Ehlers, these guys are going to be making big bucks. But when you're talking about Haydn Fleury, he's going to be somewhere around $1 million a year, which, when I say that, it makes it seem like $1 million is not a lot of money. But
not to the illegal curve, guys.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that we're rolling through in the last break. Yeah,
we're actually fundraising so that Ezzy can pay off the $5,000 kangaroo court fine we issued to him earlier in the show. So Kelly, if you don't mind throwing in a few shekels for that would be appreciated.
No,
the
Kelly,
dropping from the helicopter now.
Yeah. Just go chase it down.
Yeah, Kelly, it's actually because we have to pay the pilot his fee for flying us around in our chopper right now. But no, like what's your kind of take on Haydn Fleury? Because it seems like to me, even if he's not in your top six, to me he's still a good guy. And when you talk about being rewarded, like you talk about like Nick Ehlers when he went out of the lineup against Dallas, like Haydn Fleury had to step up his minutes. Like I just think that he's a valuable player to have around the organization, whether that's in your top six or whether that's as a 7-8 defenseman.
Yeah, the way that it stacks up, as long as the Jets remain healthy, I think he's going to be that 7 or 8 guy. And so from that perspective, because you have Colin Miller and Luke Shen under contract for another year, your top 4 is firmly established with Sandberg and Pionk and DeMello and Josh Morrissey. So I guess the question that the Jets would have to take a look at, and this might even ignite even further change, and that is, if you're going to retain Haydn Fleury, who's not that old, it's certainly like he's not a graybeard, if you're going to retain him as your 7th or 8th guy, then what are you going to do with Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley? Because I don't think you can go another season with Ville Heinola playing just a handful of games. I think, did he even get to 20 games this year? I don't think so. If you're going to retain Haydn Fleury, then I think you're going to have a plan as to what you're going to do with the other 2. With Shen on board for at least another year, you could argue that perhaps the physicality that Logan Stanley brings maybe isn't quite as a necessity as it was before they made the trade for Shen. And then we haven't even talked about Elias Solomonson either, who I think is still a year away from being a serious candidate to push his way into this lineup. But who knows what he does in training camp and the preseason. We heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff what Scott Arniel feels about Elias Solomonson, that in Rick Bonus's last year, Scott, are you sure we can't keep him? Does he have to go back to Sweden? So I think that those are the discussions that have to take place. If you're asking for what we think might happen, it's only an opinion. But I think Haydn Fleury did enough to warrant being that guy. I think they have enough of a resume on Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley to say, okay, can we maybe accrue some draft picks for them? Can we maybe accrue another depth player that fits a little better into our needs? I think those are the kind of discussions that will take place. But if I was a betting man, I would say Haydn Fleury will be with this hockey club come September, because he just helped patch up a lot of potholes over the course of the year and do it very well. And of course, that 35-minute plus performance, stepping up and filling the void when Josh Morrissey went down in Game 7 against St. Louis, was not lost on anybody.
From the broadcast booth to the helicopter, Kelly Moore is the eye in the sky covering the Winnipeg Jets. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You delivered on the great insight and analysis that we promised at the outset of the interview. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it is always my pleasure. And as you get your cup out, pennies from heaven are falling as we speak.
There you go. Kelly,
Thanks,
terrific.
Kelly.
Have a great Saturday. Thanks so much.
You bet, fellas.
Take care. There he goes, our good friend Kelly Moore joining us this morning.
Did it not sound like Kelly was doing the show from a helicopter?
It certainly did. It was great. It made it sound different than the three of us who always sound so. Sometimes we were accused of sounding similar. I don't think anybody's going to accuse Kelly of sounding exactly like us in the course of today's.
Do people think we sound similar? Is that a thing that people say?
Well, people sometimes confuse. They say, "Oh, Drew said this," and it's like, "No, Dave said that." Dave said this, and no, Ezzy said that. Sometimes people get a little confused by who says what on this program.
So it's not exactly how we sound. It's just that because there's 3 of us, and we do so many of these shows, that people forget who said what. That's more so what it is. I'm pretty sure we have distinctive voices.
We can turn that over to the audience, and they can tell us.
Should I make a poll?
I don't think we need a poll about it.
We've already got a poll right now. Vote in it. Has Nikolaj Ehlers played his last game as a member of the Winnipeg Jets?
That's a good poll.
Thank you. I thought so as well. I haven't checked the results yet in a bit, but yeah, the poll is up. So make sure you vote. Get your vote in.
There you go. We will check the results of the poll when we come back with hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, Jonny Lazarus set to join us in about 8 or so minutes time. You know Jonny from the great work he does with our friends at DailyFaceoff, so he's set to join the program. We're looking forward to that. Quick trivia question for you guys. World Hockey Championships are ongoing, semifinal Saturday. When was the last time the United States of America won gold at the World Hockey Championship?
I know the answer. It was the same year Drew Mandel was born, 1933.
Well done, Dave. You are correct. You win the prize, double prize for getting the correct answer and throwing in an age joke at my expense at the same time. So well done to you on that front. But that is sort of an incredible stat that it's been
I know
90 plus years since I know they don't usually care about the tournament. That's been the legacy of the US, but it is sort of amazing that it's been 90 plus years since they won that tournament.
Oh, that was the actual answer?
Yeah,
that was the actual answer.
A joke.
No, that wasn't a joke. That was the actual
I was going to
answer.
say they've never won it, but I know they have. They've definitely not won it in our lifetime.
Yeah,
but I guess they have won it. Oh, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. You can see it brought the joke full circle there. Let's talk about Haydn Fleury. You mentioned him, Ezzy. Certainly stepped into the Winnipeg Jets lineup in the playoffs and did a very solid job, I would argue. Picking up the Jets when he needed to, when there were some injuries, troubles on the left side of the defense, when Logan Stanley was injured, and then of course when Josh Morrissey went down. Haydn Fleury was a key contributor to the Jets in the playoffs. Is he back next year? Do the Jets have to bring him back? I mean, Kelly talked about the log jam where you have Ville Heinola still under contract. Dylan Sandberg is obviously still going to be under contract. Just without Fleury, that's 8 NHL contracts for defensemen. Can you add Fleury and make it a 9th? How does that sort of work its way out over the course of this offseason from your perspective?
I think there's a good chance actually that Haydn Fleury is signed. And I think, you mentioned it, Drew, that what's more interesting is like what's happening with Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley. I don't know necessarily that they trade both of them, but clearly Ville Heinola is buried on the depth chart here. And there's no reason to have him sitting in the press box the entire year. You wonder, right? Like, did the Jets try to get a draft pick back? Kelly mentioned it, right? Like, you gave up, I think it was a 2027 second rounder from Brandon Tanev, right? I don't think you're necessarily getting that price or that exact amount for Ville Heinola, but like, do you try to get whatever? I don't know. What is it? A 3rd round pick? A 4th round pick? I don't know. I mean,
I think you lose him on waivers at this point, Dave. I don't know that anyone's really stepping up and offering you much for Ville Heinola. And let me ask you, is it more important that you have? We know you need at least 8 defensemen, probably at the NHL level. So if you don't consider Ville Heinola to be an NHL caliber defenseman, and the sort of writing, the tea leaves would say that that's what the organization thinks of him, don't you then isn't it incumbent that you get Haydn Fleury back and your 8 defensemen, and who your top 4 is, that's pretty clear. And then your bottom pair is Stanley and Fleury on the left side and Miller and Shen on the right side in some sort of combination thereof. Is that how your 8 defensemen are heading into next season?
I mean, it's funny because I was asked this when I was talking about Salamonson and whether he would be, a player for the Jets next year. And people were asking me, and even though Kevin Cheveldayoff said he may force us to make some hard decisions, ultimately, I think he's going similar to probably what happened with Kyle Connor. He'll go down to the Moose, and if there's an injury, then he could be called up, make his NHL debut and get some games. But, the reality is that you've got a logjam. And we saw this when you had Johnny Kovacevic and Declan Chisholm, and you had these guys that you thought, okay, what are they going to look like at the NHL level? And, they're now it's not the same with Salamonson, but I'm saying if, for example, the organization and training camp tells us so much, right? Like, look, last 2 years in a row now, Salamonson was one of the last guys sent down. So clearly the organization likes what they see from him. And he's similar in that Dylan Sandberg. I mean, if you remember in Dylan Sandberg's not first year as a pro, because he played for the Moose, but like his first kind of NHL opportunity that year, I think he played like most of his games with the Moose. I think he played like 40 games with the Moose, and he played maybe 18 with the Jets or something to that nature. I think Salamonson is going to do something similar, because I think you're going to have injuries and you're going to have a need to get him into the lineup. But I think it is a fascinating question. Like, look, Fleury is fine. Like, I think Fleury did well in that one game. I don't think we want to overstate the impact of Haydn Fleury. I thought when he needed to go up to the second pairing, I thought he was in over his head. Well, I'm just saying. So we got to be a little cautious in the excitement about Haydn Fleury. I think it's a nice story. I think he clearly enjoys the group and being here, which is not a bad thing. From the Saskatchewan product. But I think that, you have to make a decision on what you're going to do. Look, this organization has bent themselves into pretzels, Ezzy. They've made, you talk about me being a contortionist, but what have they done to keep Logan Stanley and Ville Heinola as part of their roster? They've done a lot, right? They've really tried to insulate those guys. Now,
yet neither of those guys played in the playoffs. Stanley was injured, so he didn't play against Dallas because of injury, Dave. But I think it's at this point it's time to move on, is it not?
I think it's a good point. I just think that
from Heinola and Stanley, I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I don't think Stanley's going anywhere. I think
well, look how many games he played this year. I mean, Heinola played the point
18.
Kelly made 18 games.
Yeah.
So, and Logan Stanley played what? He must have played 50 something.
Probably pretty cool, especially when you factor in some of the playoff games that he played this year. He ended up playing 63 games for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, so I mean, like it's clear the writing's on the wall in that regard. But I know we got Jonny here, so we can always flip it around and talk about that on the other side.
Yeah, we'll table this conversation on the Jets defenseman, and welcome to the program from Daily Faceoff. Jonny Lazarus joins us. Jonny, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. How are things?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. And you don't have to table anything. I'm more than happy to keep the conversation going if that's what you want to do.
Well, we were talking about the bottom pair of the Winnipeg Jets defense for next year. If you have any insight on the Haydn Fleury versus Logan Stanley versus Ville Heinola debate, by all means, we welcome you to share them. But if you want to move the conversation elsewhere, we can also do that.
That's not a very passionate debate for me. Maybe I'll just let you guys table that one.
I thought you might.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets, Jonny. Obviously, you're doing a lot of great work now with Daily Faceoff, so you kept a very close eye on the Jets and the Blues, the Jets and the Stars, the two series, both of which were compelling first and second round series. From an outsider's perspective, just, you watch with the Jets, how they won Game 7 against the Blues and then their 6-game defeat to the Dallas Stars. Just maybe your overarching impressions of the Winnipeg Jets come playoff time this year?
Well, I don't think the Jets are a team that does anything different from regular season into the postseason, but I think it's the opponents that they go against that ramp up their game just a little bit more, and maybe it throws them off guard come playoff time. Like, I think I made the comparison earlier in the postseason where, those Washington Capitals teams, like throughout the 2010s, were dominant in the regular season and then always hit that second round wall. But it wasn't anything different they were doing. It was they were facing teams that just seemed to flip a switch come playoff time and were able to step up and find a way to beat them. And I feel the same about Winnipeg. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but the Winnipeg Jets team I saw all regular season looked the same, right? Like they were pretty good at 5-on-5, but their power play and goaltending is kind of what got them over the edge. 5-on-5, they were never necessarily the dominant team, but they were still really good. They were strong. They weren't the best, but they could keep up. And I think, obviously with how well Dallas had gotten on the power play in the playoffs, how hot they got, that hurts. You can make the argument about Connor Hellebuyck. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's easy. But we had Carter Hutton on our show not too long ago, and Hellebuyck's positioning and the way teams go from low to high, get pucks on net, just try to cause more traffic, where in the regular season, that's not necessarily the desperation factor isn't necessarily there in the regular season for teams to want to do that. So that changes. And I think that's why Hellebuyck might struggle a little bit more. It's not anything he's doing differently. It's the style and the strategy that the opponents have towards them. So that's my outside perspective. Like, you guys know the Jets better than me. I'm not one to pretend that I know everything about the Winnipeg Jets. I watch their games, maybe 8 or 9 games complete during the regular season. I flip around all the games in the NHL and I try to catch as many as I can. So I'm not watching 82 games in the regular season and then every game in the playoffs. Like, I watch most playoff games, obviously, but for me, I got to flip around to all of them. So it's tougher to keep up with the particular teams. So, you guys might know more than I do in that regard, but I feel like that's, my perspective on what happened to this team come playoff time.
No, we definitely don't know more, Johnny. We pretend like we try to sound like we know what we're talking about.
Speak for yourself,
but,
Ginsburg.
Yeah. No, but, by the way, it was the best that I was texting Johnny to come on the show, and he's actually got a friend who's got a last name Ginsburg. Different spelling.
My best friend. ERG though. ERG.
Yeah. That made me happy to know that there's some there's actually, it's more of a common name in the US for sure. But I mean, there's also 350 million people in the U.S. So, but yeah, just wanted to ask you. We want to get
your grandmother was a Supreme Court justice, Ruth Bader, wasn't she?
Yeah, but she married a Ginsburg. She was a Bader.
Know.
Yeah, no, we're not related. But
I was gonna say, yeah, are you actually related?
Yeah, no, we're not. But rest in peace to the former Supreme Court justice. We want to ask you about the conference finals because obviously, Edmonton shuts out Dallas last night. Stuart Skinner, just incredible. I think you'd agree he's been an incredible story with his third shutout. But I wanted to ask you about Nikolaj Ehlers because we spent a big part of the first half of the show talking about Ehlers. And there's a lot of nervous Jets fans right now because obviously Ehlers drafted by the Jets. He's coming off probably his best playoffs ever, despite the fact that he didn't play. How many games did the Jets play? I guess they played 13 games. He missed 5 of those or 6 of those. But what is your opinion on the Ehlers situation? Not whether you think he's going to sign or not, because I think we all agree that it's kind of 50-50 at this point. But more so, how do you replace a guy like that? Because like you mentioned, you don't necessarily watch every single Jets game, but he was third in the team in scoring, and just with his speed and what he's able to do, the way he's able to impact the game offensively, what we've basically been saying for the earlier in the show was it's just going to be tough to replace him because the Jets aren't typically a team that can address that in free agency.
So just looking up his contract quickly, he was making $6 million a year. He's 29 years old. I'm sure he wants to sign his last, big impactful ticket here, right? Like maybe a 7-year deal, worth up to 8.5 maybe if he can. Would you guys say he's worth that? I don't know if that's
for sure. I would. Yeah.
Mark Scheifele's getting that and Hellebuck's getting that. Is he on par with those two?
I think so. I also think, by the way, that sorry, I don't speak for Dave and Drew here, Johnny, but Hellebuyck and Scheifele are vastly underpaid, right? Like, especially Hellebuyck. If he wins the Hart Trophy making $8.5 million a year, then that's you could argue he's a $12 million a year goalie, right?
I would agree with that, but also just looking up Ehlers' stats now too. I mean, he's only really played one complete season I guess in the last 6 or so years. His early years, he was playing the full 82. So obviously, the best abilities, availability, what everyone says, right? That's a big thing. But playoffs wise, he seems to always be a guy that performs too, right? Like he's not a guy who shies away. He's not a guy whose production gets lower from regular season into postseason. You can kind of count on him to be consistent whenever he is in your lineup. But I'm happy you brought him up too, because I do think he loves being a Winnipeg Jet. And he's actually the guy that I spoke to when Winnipeg was at the Garden, I think back in November, if that's when the game was. It was like right when they set the record for 16 straight games with a point. So it was right around then, like the best start in NHL history or whatnot, but for them. And Ehlers said the difference in this team this year versus last year was that like they got embarrassed in the playoffs last year. Like he fully said we were embarrassed. And this summer, he didn't think that they needed a shift in personnel. He thought they needed a shift in mindset. And hearing that from a player makes you feel like he truly believes that this team can win. And I don't think that changed with how they went out this postseason. And from speaking to other Jets fans, I've gathered, and again, this is not my opinion, this is just what I've heard. It sucks that they lost in the second round after what was an incredible regular season, but the loss didn't leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth, if that's how you guys feel as well.
Yes, that would be fair.
But I do also think a part of that is the Scheifele stuff, which I don't need to get into. Like that was just something that like the team was kind of fighting and rallying around. And obviously it's like one of your most important players who's dealing with a, huge personal issue that I don't know many people can relate to. If anyone can relate to that, like it's not something I can speak to, obviously. And maybe that helps the loss a little bit because it's just such a human natured thing that's so much more important than a hockey game. Right. But like, again, if they lose to St. Louis in round one, it's different. And honestly, they probably should have lost. Everyone can really say that, right? Mm-hmm. Like they should have lost.
It took a miracle for them to win.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so many different things you can look at to fix this team. And Ehlers is the one constant that if he goes, it's pretty drastic. So if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, I'm doing everything in my power to keep him. And if I'm him, I don't know. It's tough. Like you want the money at this point, right? Like 29 years old, probably don't want to have to sign another contract. It's a really, really tough choice. But being that he's been there for so long, it's not an easy one for him to make to want to leave. So, yeah, I don't know. I've kind of lost myself in my own train of thought here. But...
No, I know. I mean, Johnny, it's perfectly fine because we kind of look. I think if Ehlers ends up not signing with the Jets, it's going to be a huge loss, obviously, but also just the skill. Like I'm going to personally miss just watching. Like there's not that many players that have the combination of the speed and the hands that Ehlers has, right? So I know Dave earlier said he thinks there's a 40% chance. I said there's a 50% chance, but I'm not sure if you saw earlier this week, Kevin Cheveldayoff said that he had a 2-hour conversation with Ehlers representatives. So I think that gave Jets fans like even more hope that he's going to stay. But right now, I mean, it would be very difficult to replace him. The only way I see him being replaced is via free agency, but in the past, the Jets haven't been big players in free agency, right?
Well, I don't think he's a guy that's going to like chase the money and go to a team that isn't contending. He's been on a good competitive Winnipeg team for however many, 10 years into the league now in his career? How many years has he been here?
Yeah, about that, 10 or 11,
10 years. So that's like the one thing you can look at as a positive, right? Like he's been kind of knocking on the door for a Stanley Cup since he entered the league. Like Winnipeg's been good and been competitive since he's been there. So it's not like he's going to take $9 million and sign in Chicago. Like that's not what I think he would do, right? So I feel like that helps the percentage of him wanting to stay. Is what team that is good and is competitive willing to give him that much money, right? Because I don't know if there really are many out there. So that's something you can definitely rely on. But it's a lot. Listen, a lot of guys care more about the money than they do about winning. That's just the hard truth. But I don't know if he's one of them. I don't think he is.
Well, Johnny, getting away from the Jets and focusing a little bit on these playoffs. I mean, when you watch the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers in the regular season, if you watch them regularly, these look like teams that know what it takes to get. Obviously, the Panthers won the Stanley Cup. The Oilers got to the Stanley Cup Finals last year. So you watched them, you thought, okay, they're going at like 70%. They're not at 100% right now. They're coasting into the playoffs because they know what it takes to win when you get there. Do you have any doubt that this is going to be a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup Finals? Because I mean, when you watch Connor McDavid play, and I've watched all the Oilers games, I have not watched as faithfully the Eastern Conference games as I do the Western Conference games, but when you watch McDavid, it's like he's on another level, and it's amazing to watch a guy make NHLers look like they're AHLers. And I don't mean that as an insult to someone who covers the AHL, but it is incredible to watch what McDavid's doing, but also what the Florida Panthers are doing out east.
Well, I think with McDavid, it's crazy. Isn't it crazy to say he was almost like better in last year's playoffs? Like he was, right?
Yeah.
I think he might have had 30 points already, like at this point of the playoffs last year, which is insane. But I don't know. Like, I'm not going to count out Dallas right away, even though the series is shifting back to Edmonton. But at 5-on-5 right now, Edmonton's been the clear better team, right? So you take away those power plays in game one, it's 2-0 Oilers probably going back to Edmonton.
Exactly.
That said, as good as Skinner was last night, and I like full transparency, I only saw the highlights last night. I was at the Knicks game last night, so I couldn't watch the game.
How did that go, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, I was with one of my best friends he's like an even bigger fan. So like being with him made it like kind of more fun for me, at least when they lost, just because like he's so emotionally into it. Like, you know, he's like ripping his shirt in half like every possession, and I'm like, okay, I'm not like that, but like, you know. So it made it a little bit more fun for me. Obviously a shitty loss, but it's a little off topic. But from what I gathered, like again, a pretty dominant performance from the Oilers last night from what it seemed like.
Yeah.
And Skinner obviously steps up, has a shutout, but it didn't seem, at least in the 10-minute highlight package that they showed, it didn't seem like Dallas really had that many high quality chances. You know, and again, I'm just like doing the Spark Notes version here, but there's still a part of me that thinks this Dallas team has more to give. And the fact that it's 1-1 says something, right? Like Edmonton, and you think back to the Cup final last year too, where they give their best game and still come up short. Like that's still possible with Skinner and his inconsistency. The Oilers can play a phenomenal game in front of him, but something could happen where Dallas finds 3 chances and those 3 chances go in where they're opportunistic. Whereas Ottinger, I feel like you can count on him just a little bit more. The goals didn't seem like his fault last night. A couple weird bounces. You know, I think that first goal, Nugent Hopkins is backdoor untouched, but like it takes a funny bounce off a shin pad and gets to his blade, and he has a tap in. The third one, I think, was a weird one too, right? Like a little, I think it hit something in front and went behind him or something like that. Kulak, the second one, block shot, great block by Rantanen actually, and then he gets his own rebound right on his blade. But I think Dallas has a much stronger chance than people are probably going to give them, even though that wouldn't have been a hot take going into the series. But with after the first 2 games, from what we've seen, you know, it's probably a hotter take than it was. Carolina.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying Carolina because I didn't even touch the East. Like, it's hard to imagine them getting back in. They just don't seem like they have any answer.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. You know, have the Panthers just broken Carolina? I mean, you have the home fans chanting "shoot the puck" in game 2.
Drew, they can't win an Eastern Conference Finals game.
Yeah. And it's funny, like the conversation I was having about the Hurricanes, I think they might have broken themselves more than the Panthers broke them. And I'm not trying to take any credit away from the Panthers, but like they came out and looked intimidated, and I wasn't sure if it was intimidated by the moment, knowing the noise around them in the Eastern Conference Final, or if it was the opponent, right? Like, I'm not sitting here and saying the Carolina Hurricanes are a much worse hockey team than the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? I mean, the Maple Leafs found a way to squeeze the Panthers out and squeeze them to 7 games, you know, but the Maple Leafs found ways. Like, you know, I know there were some moments where the Panthers overcommitted on the wall and the Maple Leafs had to use the puck up the middle and find open guys and seams, and they would get 2-on-1s, breakaways, they'd get scoring chances. Like game 1, game 2, the Panthers looked like a shell of themselves in that series, but you know, that was partially credit to Toronto and their top guys, like finding ways to, you know, sneak through the Panthers defensemen who were cheating outside the dots, like little things like that, where Carolina hasn't found an answer yet or hasn't exploited them yet. And Taylor Hall had a great quote yesterday too, like saying, we have to, every hockey team has a weakness. We have to find a way to exploit it, and we have to find out what it is. Like the Maple Leafs just got them to 7 games. But again, Florida to me is a much more dominant team versus Edmonton and Dallas in that series. And being that that's going back to Florida and they're up 2-0, it's going to be very, very difficult for Carolina to find one. But they have to score the first goal. That's the biggest thing. The Hurricanes aren't a team that can chase the game. They're a team that they get out to a lead, they can shut a game down, but they're not the opposite.
Rod Brindamore almost looks so upset after the first 2 games. It's almost like he's going to strap the pads on and potentially play for the Hurricanes.
Well, he's probably tired of answering the questions about the conference final and all that kind of shit.
No,
it's not on him though. He's the coach.
It is on him. Yeah, it is on him. 1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know the Stanley Cup is one of the hardest trophies to win, if not the hardest trophy, and it's kind of similar to the Jets trying to get over the second round hump, right? Like they got past the first round hump, and now they're trying to get to the Stanley Cup final, or at the very least the conference final. So I think you can look at it from 2 perspectives, like that Carolina is not elevating their game later into the playoffs, or that Florida is just that good, right? And they're up against a different beast. But I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned earlier you're based in New York. We know that. I wanted to ask you about the hiring of Mike Sullivan, because as you know, it was a very disappointing season for the Rangers, but it seems like to me, Johnny, that like I've always been a huge fan of Mike Sullivan as a coach. He's done such a great job in Pittsburgh. Just seems like that's the perfect hire to get this thing back on the right track in New York.
Yeah. Full transparency, I'm not like too moved by it, just because when I look at the roster right now, it doesn't look like a Stanley Cup champion roster. Right. You can bring in any coach you want, and at the end of the day, you need the players that are going to go out there and do it, right? And I think that's been the biggest learning lesson for Rangers fans, which honestly Jets fans might go through this in the near coming future. It's like, we saw this core, as you'll call it, Zibanejad, Kreider, Fox, Shesterkin. Now you can put Trocheck in there too after the past couple of years. And even at their best, it wasn't good enough. Like they couldn't have played any better against Florida last year. 3 years ago, they couldn't have played any better against Tampa, and they came up short, in both those years. The 2023 year, it's a wash because they brought in Kane and Tarasenko, and, that was an experiment. But, I think that's the hardest part as a fan and as, upper management, is to look at what you have and decide that no matter how good we can be, it's not it. So I think this summer they have to figure that out, and they have to make some significant moves to change up what this core looks like. And obviously that started last year, bringing in JT Miller, getting rid of Jacob Trouba, trading away Capo Caco, like all these different things that, they kind of wanted to plug and play on the fly versus sitting down and assessing it in the offseason. So I think this offseason will be big, and I'm not going to get excited about Mike Sullivan until I see some changes to the roster. That said, again, they went out and got the best guy available at the time, so you got to give him credit. But I think for most fans that think like me, he can be a Jack Adams winner, but it doesn't mean this team is the group of guys that can do it, because I don't think right now, as it's constructed, they are.
Just one more question before Dave asks his question. Like, you obviously would know the Rangers better than we would. I mean, like you said, I watch the Rangers. I'm actually a Devils fan, Johnny, so I try not to watch the Rangers when I don't have to. But I'm obviously, I cheer for the Jets as well. But the point being, don't watch them enough to know necessarily what area needs the most improvement. But for you, is it like, is it on defense? Obviously, Shesterkin is the man in goal, but like you mentioned, Artemi Panarin and Zibanejad, JT Miller, Trocheck, like it seems like they've still got enough offensively. Like, is that for you what they like? Is it a shutdown defenseman that they need most?
So I think the blue line certainly needs, I don't want to say like size to it, but maybe physicality. From what I've heard around the league and guys I've talked to, like, no one goes into the Rangers, I guess no one's playing offense against the Rangers and is like afraid of getting beaten up, And with that too, I think team speed is something that needs to improve as well. Like, there's so many times where the Rangers forwards get caught up the ice and they're not back in time, and the other team has a 4-on-2, 3-on-2, 2-on-1. Like, Igor Shesterkin, to me, isn't making $11.5 million just because of how good he plays. He's making $11.5 million for the shit he has to put up with. You know, like, there are grade A after grade A after grade A that he is stopping most of the time. And I think, to me, that's why he's worth more, because the Rangers give up. I think they had like the most high danger chances against in the slot this year. I think that was a stat. And odd man rushes against, I think that was another stat. Like, they're constantly cheating for offense, and it costs them the other way. And I think that's something that Mike Sullivan's going to have to come in and teach too, is, risking the offense to not have your goaltender face odd man rush after odd man rush and chance in the slot and a backdoor chance and, all these other things. So certainly making the blue line stronger is probably the number one priority. But team speed up and down, to me, you're not going to get to the Stanley Cup final if you can't keep up with the other teams. So that's a big one to me. Like, Florida, they were above the puck constantly in that series. The Rangers never really had many odd man rushes, none that I can think of. I mean, Lafreniere had a couple of nice goals, but outside of those highlight reel ones that he had against Florida, like, there was not much.
Jonny Lazarus from DailyFaceoff, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Great insight, great discussion. We look forward to welcoming you back again at a soon date and time is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, guys. And Ezra, I know you've been hitting me up on Saturdays, and sorry I haven't been able to make them work over the past few weeks. But
no, you came on, Johnny. It's all good.
Yeah.
No, well, you were busy. You were busy broadcasting, so we always appreciate you coming on, and I'll try to catch you as much as we can on Daily Faceoff. We've got some friends there, old friends with. I guess Frank is Frank still with Daily Faceoff, or is he officially left?
June 30, he's done, I think.
Okay, so he's still got another month or so.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Jonny Lazarus joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll take our final break, come back with more Jets talk. 20 or so minutes to go on this Saturday morning. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. Do as Kim says and smash the like button. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show rolls on.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now, you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Center. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Center. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.ca.
DailyFaceoff.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
20 minutes before the top of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Manuka, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Reminder, in case you missed any of the end-of-season interviews, they are all available on our website, illegalcurve.com, as well as on our YouTube channel. That way you can get caught up on what everything all the players had to say. Not all of them. Some of them weren't there. Ehlers, Niederreiter, they're, of course, playing in the World Hockey
Ehlers
Championship.
was actually scoring a goal for Denmark as the media availabilities were happening.
He might have, and of course, Mark Scheifele, for obvious reasons, was not there as well. The amount of money that has been raised to the True North Youth Foundation and Kids Sport is fantastic. I think I saw a Kids Sport, I don't know if it was a tweet or a press release, something, they got $40,000, something along those lines. Just huge numbers that are going to make a tangible difference. So kudos to everybody in the hockey world for stepping up in this instance. I mentioned it last Saturday on the post-game show that I thought it was how great I thought it was, and we all think it is, and it was great to see it again as well. So some real money being raised that's going to make a difference in our communities, so that's absolutely fantastic. We left off talking about Haydn, Fleury, and the Jets defense entering into next year, and with the sort of the concept that the maximum number of defensemen you're going to keep on your roster when everyone's healthy is 8. You're not going to have 9 defensemen at the NHL level. It's just too many. You're not going to have you're going to have 8. That's generally where teams go. And if they re-sign Haydn, Fleury, I think the 8 are pretty clear, and it doesn't include Ville Heinola. It's, the top 4, Sandberg and Morrissey, DeMello and Pionk, and then it's Shen and it's Miller, both of whom are under contract. It's Stanley, and if they get Haydn, Fleury back, he's the 8th as well. Those to me, are an 8 that you can do battle with in a regular season. Those are 8 that you can handle during the regular season. Might you want to improve on something there in the back end of the year? Yeah, so be it. And the time will tell on that front. But those 8, especially when you can mix and match on that third pair, where maybe it's you need more of a puck mover, and as a result, Haydn, Fleury and Colin Miller in the lineup, or you need more physicality and it's Stanley and Shen, whatever it might be. But those would likely be the 8 I would go and start the year off with. And then if Elias Salomonsson earns a spot, so be it, and you cross that bridge when you come to it. That's sort of my quick glance at the Jets defense for next year and where Haydn, Fleury would slot in, noting that that means that Ville Heinola isn't in my plans for the Jets defense for next season.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking about before Jonny Lazarus came on, I wonder if Heinola is a guy that you trade. Obviously, Drew, you think that there isn't much of a return for him. I still think you would get something for him. He is a first-round pick.
Yeah, he's a first-round pick from how many years ago who hasn't played any NHL games?
Okay. So we'll agree that you're not going to get anything for a trade deadline. So maybe you're just going to give him away, I guess, so to speak. But I think that, all due respect, the decisions that have to be made up front to me are much more interesting. Like on defense, you've got everyone that really is key to your lineup locked up. Haydn, Fleury is a guy that you're most likely going to be signing to a 1 or 2 year deal. The big uncertainty is what are you doing with your top 6? And the big thing with forward group, when you're talking about Nikolaj Ehlers, that's a huge hole to fill. We already talked about 2C. If you were already a one-line team in the playoffs against Dallas, which essentially the Jets were, so to speak, then you're going to be even more of a one-line team without Nikolaj Ehlers. So that, to me, is the big uncertainty. I think
that's a very fair point, Ezzy. I mean, I talked about it, I think, before. I don't know if you had joined the show yet or not at that point, but to me, the Jets are without Nikolaj Ehlers, the Jets are a 1 top 6 forward away from being a real threat to some of these other teams. They had a great year, don't get me wrong. You take Ehlers out of that equation as well, you're 2 top 6 forwards away from being truly a competitive team, and those don't grow on trees, Dave. They don't come around very easily. The Ehlers conundrum is a significant one for the Jets at this point in the offseason. I think entering into as you get closer to July 1st in free agency.
I don't think there's any question about it. I think there's a reason we spent the first half an hour of our reflective show discussing kind of the end of season stuff and knowing that Nikolaj Ehlers is kind of that question mark for the Jets. So, I mean, yes, again, it's one of those worlds that we know that Brad Lambert didn't have the best season with the Moose. Nobody had the best season with the Moose. So that's probably worth noting that the Moose were not a very good team this year. So we already saw the first exodus from the team. Axel Jonsson-Fjällby signing back home in Sweden for 3 years as he. So the Flow show is taking it back over to Sweden. But the fact of the matter is that, look, I mean, there's no doubt about it that you cannot. Again, I'm not saying Brad Lambert's not going to be a successful NHLer. I've heard from folks who watch the game, who scout the game, who say that they think he's going to have a good career and that he's got, that sort of ability. I mean, look, there's no question about it. He's got the speed. He's got a shot. Didn't score a lot of goals. Had a lot of assists this year, but didn't score a lot of goals. Again, something that the entire Moose team suffered from. But, it is asking a lot for a guy who's 8 years younger, who has not been at the NHL level to be like, oh, okay, well, we're going to slot you in where Nikolaj Ehlers was. And so that's the biggest factor for the Winnipeg Jets is that, this is a team that is going to need, it's interesting, right? We're talking about a team that has not done anything though. So, you could say, well, you need to make some changes. The problem is, as we've all outlined and as we've all discussed, is that change isn't coming via free agency. So if it's not coming via free agency and you're looking internally and you don't feel like you're prepared to say that internally you have it, well, if you lose Nikolaj Ehlers, then where are you as an organization? Now, you could say, well, fine, you have to play better defense, that sort of thing. But now you are ultimately at
how much better defense can they play? They've given up the fewest goals in the league for the last 2 years.
I know. No, I understand that. But look, you don't need to be the President's Trophy winner. And home ice was obviously very important, right, for this team. They didn't win a playoff game on the road. So that was somewhat important for them. But for me, ultimately, the conundrum that is the Jets forward group, especially, the only other option though, of course, would be to break up the Scheifele, Velarde and Connor line.
But you're still, look, take Vlad Nemesnikov out of the equation. If Ehlers is gone, you have 4 of your top 6 forwards, that you can go to battle with. You can go battle with Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, and Perfetti, and whatever combination you want. You still have 2 holes in your top 6 that aren't easily being filled. We know that free agents, and maybe that'll change, and maybe there's one free agent who loves what he saw of Winnipeg and wants to come back here, and that would be the exception rather than the rule. And maybe they can dip into that market and find somebody for the top 6. But the truth is, without Ehlers, you have 2 holes in your top 6 that you're still trying to fill. Nemesnikov, does whatever he can. And, maybe Morgan Barron gets an opportunity up in the second line center role, next season. And, time will tell on that front. But again, you're trying to fill huge, important roles on this team without having a sort of an obvious way forward, an obvious path forward to do so. Nikolaj Ehlers has a lot of leverage right now, is what I'm saying. So that, if he says he'll stay in Winnipeg, that I think would be a big boon to the Winnipeg Jets. But at the same time, the Jets don't have a lot that they can, play hardball with when it comes to contract negotiations there, has he?
No, not at all. And that's why it's a wait and see now with what happens with Ehlers, right? That's all there is to it. Free agency begins July 1st, I believe. Is it July 1st again this year? I think It hasn't changed, right? Yep. So that's when we're going to find out, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have anything further before July 1st. There obviously could be a contract extension, but you're right. It's not just Ehlers. You've been knocked out of the playoffs 2 years in a row with Vlad Nemesnikov as your second line center. Obviously, they were 1 game away from bringing it back to Winnipeg for Game 7, and then who knows what happens. Maybe the Jets are in the conference finals. But regardless of where the Jets have finished in the playoffs, I think we'd all agree Vlad Nemesnikov has not got the job done. I think he's done he's been as good as Nemesnikov's going to be. Nobody is going to confuse Nemesnikov for an 80-point forward. He just isn't, right? But that's what the Jets need. Look what Dallas did prior to the deadline. They acquired Mikko Rantanen, right? The Jets acquired Brandon Tanev, who didn't have any points. Like, again, I'm not comparing Brandon Tanev to Mikko Rantanen, but Rantanen took a great Dallas Stars team and made them even greater, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where I think there's the biggest question marks is the top six. And like, we can talk all we want about, what the future of Ville Heinola is or what the future of Logan Stanley is, but all due respect to those guys, those are 7-8 defensemen, right? Like at this point, I don't think anybody there's not this other level to those types of guys on the back end, right? So I think when you're talking about the forward group, I mean, this is it. You take Ehlers, think about the power play for a second. You take Nikolaj Ehlers off of that first power play unit, it's not as dangerous of a power play. Obviously, they've still got Kyle Connor. They've still got Gabe Vilardi and Scheifele and Morrissey, right? And Cole Perfetti is a guy that I think we all agree could let's say, fill the shoes or fill the skates of Nikolaj Ehlers. But there's so many different aspects of the game. And yes, it's the speed, but it's also the one-man zone entry. Ehlers is a very, very impactful player. Well, so take him out of the lineup, there's a ripple down effect.
We talked about it, that 5-on-5 this season, during the regular season, the Jets were an average team, but maybe a bit above average at 5-on-5. They were tremendous on the power play. That won them a number of games. We know how good they were defensively and goaltending. So, that is probably going to continue. I don't expect to see a big diminishment in that area. But for a team that was basically average at 5-on-5, you can't lose top six forwards and then not replace them and expect to still be average at 5-on-5. Plus, it would likely result in a hit to the power play that was so good and so instrumental in so many victories for you this year. I mean, that role, whether it's Ehlers or somebody else, forget it. Maybe Ehlers doesn't want to re-sign here. That's entirely going to be his prerogative once he hits free agency. Maybe there's no deal to be made, Dave. But you have to figure out a way to fill, I would argue, 2 spots in your top 6, because ideally, yes, you can get by with Nemesnikov as a second-line center or Morgan Barron as a second-line center for another regular season. You can do so. But you still need to fill that Ehlers role if he's not there anymore. And otherwise, everything's going to take a hit. And then you're still going to try and have to fill it come trade deadline.
Right. And I think realistically what you'll do, like, let's just get the Nemesnikov part out of the way. I mean, ultimately, I don't think you're going to replace a 2C until the trade deadline anyways, Drew. So I think they may audition some guys. Maybe Nemesnikov starts there. Maybe he's on the wing. If there's no Ehlers, maybe Nemesnikov goes to the wing and Morgan Barron gets that look at 2C. He's big. He's fast. He's got good hands. He can, maybe he just needs that opportunity. I'm not saying one way or the other. I mean, that's the one thing about training camp that we always seem to forget. Remember, like, Ville Heinola, if he doesn't get injured against the Ottawa Senators in that last exhibition game, had a spot in the top 6, right? It was most likely the Nate Schmidt, who's currently chasing his Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers, would have been on waivers or something like that. So there are a lot of questions that are going to be answered in training camp, I think. But yeah, I mean, look, I think ultimately, let's be realistic. Free agency is not going to be a time for the Jets to solve this. And quite honestly, if you look at it, most teams that, quote, win free agency in July don't end up winning the Stanley Cup.
Hey, the Nashville Predators are in the Stanley Cup final, aren't they?
Well, exactly. But so and look, Nashville, I mean, remember, all those guys are now old. A lot of those older free agents are now older, right? A year older. So it doesn't necessarily bode well for Nashville, who got rid of some of their younger players. But I just think that if you're a Jets fan, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this kind of sorts itself out, in the sense that you're going to have, again, Ehlers the big unknown, and I phrased it. I'll get to the poll question right now, because it was, does Nikolaj Ehlers ever play another game in a Jets jersey? Chuck called me out as he said, well, what about if he ever comes back and plays in an alumni game? Then he is that technically in a and I did think of that when I was writing the question, but
Chuck is splitting hairs.
He is, but we have 228 votes. 57% feel that he does. So they're taking that tack, whereas I'm on the other side of the poll where I didn't vote, but I would think that it's more of a 40% chance that he doesn't. But anyways, we'll see that we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, look, there's no question the Jets are going to have to figure something out in terms of that. But then we wonder, Drew, if they audition, and we'll see what Nikita Chibrikov, who again obviously had that injury that ended his season with the Moose, he's rehabbing it currently. Brad Lambert also obviously had the premature injury that ended his season early and was rehabbing it. So we'll see what training camp brings with these guys. But I don't look, if Ehlers doesn't sign, then yes, that's going to be a huge hole. There's no easy way to look at it. It's just a question of whether the sum of all parts, whether this team can kind of collectively get it done and fill that hole in some capacity internally, because it's not coming externally.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people mention
that's a huge problem though, because it's not coming internally.
Well, and to that point about the internal, and I've seen
Brad
a lot
Lambert,
of people...
you can't go into next year with Brad Lambert thinking that he's going to fill the shoes of Nikolaj Ehlers.
No,
he just can't do it.
He hasn't shown it yet at the AHL level.
He's 8 years younger than Ehlers. I mean, guys, let's. He doesn't have eight. Like Ehlers came into the league. He was drafted in 2014, right? He came in and he was playing like in the NHL right away, right? And he played that way for, I mean, 9 years in Winnipeg. So, I mean, 9 seasons in Winnipeg or something like that. Was this his 10th or no, I think it was his 9th season, right? So, I mean, Brad Lambert has, a couple
in Winnipeg. This was his 10th year.
Okay. So he finished his 10th year. That makes sense, right? 15 to 25. But the fact of the matter is that, again, you can't expect Lambert, who, again, I have all the time for. He's a good prospect. He's got some very good appeal, but he's not going to be Nikolaj Ehlers, who's played 10 more seasons than he has.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why, Dave, when you say that they're not going to be able to fix it externally, that's a huge issue if they can't sign him, right? So
you can't fix it externally and you can't fix it internally unless you re-sign him. That tells me there's a bit of a
no. What I mean is you wouldn't have to fix it externally if you sign Ehlers, and that's the big unknown right now. Whereas if you would have asked the three of us a couple months ago, we probably would have said, yeah, Ehlers is probably not re-signing in Winnipeg, and now, based on what we've heard from Chevy and this 2-hour conversation, like I have no idea if that 2-hour conversation was beneficial or maybe they just didn't get anywhere. Like we have no idea. That's what we don't. There's a big unknown right now. Mm-hmm. We hope that Ehlers resigns, but there's a big difference between hoping a player resigns and it actually happening, right? So that's what I'm saying. If it could be not devastating if they're not able to keep him, but it's going to be very tough to replace him, I believe. Like we would think that Chevy would look at the free agent market and try to bring in free agent. Like I know a guy whose name is out there that could make sense for the Jets is Brock Besser. The only problem is Brock Besser is not Nikolaj Ehlers. They play a very different type of game. So again, you're not trying to find a Nick Ehlers clone out there. No. But what you have to
find
do is
a top 6 forward.
Yeah, you have to find a top 6 forward who adds all of those different elements, the speed, what he does on the power play, everything like that, right? So,
it doesn't matter, exactly to your point there, Ezzy. You don't need Nikolaj Ehlers, a redux of him. You just need somebody who can fit into your top 6, somebody who's a legitimate top 6 forward in the NHL.
Well, and that's why, maybe aside from Dave, I'm the biggest Morgan Barron fan. But like, guys, they're not going into this next year with him as their second line center.
Well, I don't think that it's impossible that they will. I don't think that's necessarily off the table. They can move Nemesnikov. If they think that Barron's got a higher upside at center than Vlad Nemesnikov, I could see them making a switch to that effect. Or maybe to Dave's point, if they can't otherwise fill the role, another top 6 forward, I mean, I could conceivably see them going with Barron, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti as your second line, because what other options are you left with if you don't otherwise fill it by free agency or trade? So I don't think it's an impossibility.
If your second line is Morgan Barron, Vlad Nemesnikov, and Cole Perfetti, that's going to be a significant drop off from this year.
No question whatsoever.
And that's what I'm saying. That's why that's not good. And again, I qualify that by saying I'm a big fan of Morgan Barron. And look, I would love it for a second line center. You're going to need a guy that's going to put up 60 or 70 points. Can Morgan Barron do that? I don't know. I think it's a lot to ask out of him.
I would agree. I would agree that it's a lot to ask out of him to expect it. You know, maybe he surprises you when he gets to that level, but he's never shown any signs that that's his ceiling or that's his capability at the NHL level. So it would be a surprise, and it would be a great scenario for the Jets to have that occur. But it's a long, saying that today on May the 24th is a long ways away from actually seeing it happen come the end of the 25-26 season. That would be there's a world of difference between the two. I've also seen people say, what about Dmitry Reshevsky? What about Dmitry Reshevsky? Well, Dmitry Reshevsky has never played a game at the NHL level. He's a nice prospect that there's still no word in for one way or the other. If
we have no idea how good he's going to be at the NHL
Of course you don't. And there's no guarantee that he's going to come over and play at the NHL level either. I mean, his contract in the KHL expires, I believe, at the end of this month, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, May 31st.
And Kevin Cheveldayoff said in the end of season interview that he had a conversation with Reshevsky's representatives during the playoffs. So if he's able to come over, if the Jets get him over to North America, that's a win in and of itself. But it's also a long ways away from saying that he's going to be an NHL regular or somebody that the Jets can rely on come, regular season NHL games. So there's a lot of unknowns and a world of uncertainty as it pertains to the Winnipeg Jets roster for next year, especially when it comes to Nikolaj Ehlers, Dmitry Reshevsky, and all sorts of other players.
Well, I think Rob Mahoney has a pretty good reason for why Reshevsky will be successful. He said, Reshevsky scored 34 goals and 29 assists last year for the Jets in my EA NHL 25, so I'm pretty sure he can be the answer.
That's just science right there. That's science from Rob Mahoney, that if he does it in the video game, he's got to do it in real life as well. That will do it for us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. A big thank you to Kelly Moore and Jonny Lazarus for joining us on the program. In case you missed either of those interviews, the instant replay is available on the YouTube channel. The podcast will be available shortly as well. We want to say a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make this show, who make the post-game show when it was going on, who make the website a possibility. That, of course, is our friends at Play Now. Learn to bet with Play Now, the official betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets. Sign up and get up to $250 in bonus bets. Conditions apply. 18+. Enjoy responsibly. Big thank you to our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. If you're looking for something to do tonight, Josh Wolf at Rumors, 7:15 is sold out. There's a few tickets left for 9:45. Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, Seagram's, and the 2025 Rady JCC Sports Dinner. These are all sponsors of the programming, and we appreciate their continued support of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thanks to all of you for spending your Saturday morning with us. We'll be back again next Saturday with another edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We remind you in the interim, illegalcurve.com, the YouTube channel. When news breaks, we have it covered for you entirely on Illegal Curve. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on, and be sure to join us next Saturday here on the program. For Dave Manouk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mandel. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.